because my doppelganger back up here to my left can see my face. And so I am Wendy Despain. Ha ha ha.
Hello.
I'm teaching your class this month. I did write the book, which was brought up before we started this conversation. I edited the book that you had for your other game writing class, and I wrote parts of it, but I was editor on the cover, and I was also editor of the follow-up book called something else.
Don't know your own books?
The thing is, they changed the titles at the very last minute. So you like spend a year writing a book under one title, and then the publisher's like, "Oh, we like this title better." And
Lovely.
so, yeah. The second one's called Writing for Video Game Genres from FPS to RPG. See, I didn't like it because it's too hard to say, and they were like, nobody says book titles anymore. They just search for them on Google. So.
That book, right over there.
Yeah. And I also just got done doing a book called 100 Principles of Game Design, which is for game designers and students, and it's helpful for people who want to be writers as well, because it's kind of a reference book, kind of a dictionary. So when your designer, programmer friends start throwing around random game designy terms, you can be like, I know that term, or hang on while I look up that term, because I've got the dictionary right here.
Professor, I don't mean to interrupt. Have you heard of a web show called Extra Credits?
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I mean, sorry. Yes, I'm familiar with James and his work.
yes. I was wondering if I should recommend that to people because I really like that show. And it's related to game design.
Yes, it's a good one. I rarely disagree with what he has to say. And when I do, I take it up with him personally. And we have long conversations over dinner about how wrong he is, and he still fails to correct his mistakes when he goes back to his show. No, since this is being recorded, I should clarify that really he does a good job of conveying a lot of information in a short amount of time and kind of making it accessible to everybody. And so, yes, that's definitely a good webcast kind of thing.
Okay.
To watch and just get a sense of another person's viewpoint on video games. Which brings me to the first question I ask at the beginning of this class and every month, because I know the whole program is creative writing for entertainment. It's not how to write for video games. So you've only had one other class on how to write for video games. So how many of you are interested in writing for video games as a potential career path? And how many of you are like, I'm more into this about how to collaborate in workshop? I actually want you to use the little show of hands thing on your interface. All right, so raise your hand if you want to be a game writer when you grow up.
I'm not cool with that second part.
When you grow up part?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't want to grow up.
Oh.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you really want to get paid to be a game writer, you have to grow up a little bit because they require things like grammar and spelling and deadlines and stuff. All right, so it looks like we've got 3 out of 9, 3, 4. A couple of people who can't make up their minds. All right, half-ish. That's a nice split. The reason that they throw all of the, hey, game design advanced version into the workshopping for class is that games are one of the most collaborative forms of writing that exist. And in fact, I have a fun little top 10 list that you can see on screen now. And number 1 is Whodunit. And this is why it's both a game writing class and a workshopping collaboration kind of class. Somebody's got cute dogs. I've got cute dogs.
That would be me. I'm sorry.
My dogs would not let me do this without making themselves a nuisance, so I do this from the office. So I can relate. Anyway, where was I?
I do apologize.
I was talking about being collaborative and how game writing is like the most intense collaborative experience you'll ever have with writing. In traditional forms of entertainment writing, especially with things like film, it all starts with the script, right? You write the script and you give it to the guys, the producers and everybody else, and they start with the script and they may rewrite it, they may, change it beyond whatever it is that you started with, but they start with the script and they make a budget and they figure out who they need to hire and they do the casting and they do everything based off of the script which the writer wrote. In comics, which is another class I know you take, there's a collaboration between the artist and the writer, but that's still just like, and there's an editor in there too, oftentimes being like, no, fix this. You can't have a cape. He had a cape in episode whatever 5 years ago and it went badly. Anyway, so there are some collaborative elements to the other forms of traditional entertainment writing, but in writing for games, you are not the most important person in the room. In fact, you're often, as the writer, you're the last person, well, second to last person hired. The last person to get hired is the person who does all of the audio work. The only people who are less respected than writers in the game industry are the people who do all the audio work, which is really ridiculous because sound design and music and things like that make an experience so much more immersive and better, or annoying, oh my gosh, I can't take another ding or I'm gonna die, it's important stuff, and yet that's not who gets to make the decisions most of the time. And it's partly because of where games began. They started with programmers in their garages putting together 8-bit art where a square is you and Pac-Man was amazing because it was a circle instead of a square. And so it started there and gradually grew to the point where they were like, you know what, maybe if we hire an artist, they could make our art even better. But they were really reluctant to hire artists because that meant giving up a little bit of power. But then in reviews, they realized that the reviewers who were helping people decide what games to buy, reviewers were saying, oh my gosh, the graphics on this game are amazing. And so they reluctantly, all the programmers making games, reluctantly agreed that, all right, we better hire artists. So then it was programmers and artists for a very long time working together making games. And kind of keeping up with technology, because as the computers got better, they were able to handle more realistic looking art. And so the art got more and more realistic, and the programmers got more and more realistic physics and having more and more fun shooting things. And doing other things, but mostly shooting things. And then they realized that pretty much all the art is looking about the same. Not that every art style is the same in games, but nobody really says in game reviews, oh my gosh, the graphics in this are amazing. Like, it's not the graphics that change people's minds about which game they're going to buy. People have started to realize that people play games, or at least some people play games for the story. And some game developers are beginning to admit that maybe they should hire people who know something about story if they want to stand out from the crowd. So that in their reviews they get, oh my gosh, the story was amazing. You should buy this game because the story is amazing. That's not shown up in a review up until about 2005. And then it started to show up more and more, and there's always kind of a delay of about 2 or 3 years. So, because it takes about 3 years to make a AAA game. So, right about now, you're starting to see AAA games coming out on consoles that are really story-centric and have hired writers from the beginning or have an entire staff of writers. And even if they are primarily about running and shooting, there's still a story in there, and the writing has improved a great deal because they're starting to hire writers. But they do it, like I said, reluctantly, because the programmers like to think they can do it all themselves. And didn't they all pass English in high school, and so that means they're a writer and they know exactly what they're doing. So we're kind of being reluctantly welcomed into the team and not like put in charge by any means. I do contract work regularly still, and my last job, when I was hired, I was brought in pre-production, which means the game didn't exist yet. It was still just, it had been given a green light. It was definitely going to happen, but the characters had been decided, the setting had been decided, the overall plot. They knew it was going to be mysteries, and these are the characters that were going to populate these mysteries, but they knew they needed a writer to actually write the mysteries and come up with an overarching plot that could tie together a series of episodes. So, like, they knew that was beyond them, the whole episodic character arc kind of thing, but they'd already created characters and setting and general idea for what the plot was going to be. So that was way before they hired anybody that would have a writing credit. That was created by the studio head and the producer and artists. And so when I was brought in, I was there to fill in blanks because they mostly hired me because they were too busy doing other things to continue doing what they had already started. And they did recognize that somebody else, you know, okay, fine, there are experts out there who know something about story and episodic storytelling and that kind of thing. So we'll hire an expert to do that. But it was not like I got to make a lot of decisions. The characters were named. They had their primary characteristics already, you know, their character sheets already filled out. The gameplay was settled. The plan was in place, and they just needed me to be a part of the team as it moved forward so that when a speech bubble popped up, it had words in it. So collaborative writing is way different in games than in other forms of entertainment writing because you have to be willing to be, I don't want to say just another cog. It feels like it sometimes, like, oh, you know, we're all just working together for the man. But it's more like this is not just your experience that you're helping to come to fruition. This is everybody's experience. Like, everybody's working together to make a great experience. The artists want it to be amazing. The programmers want it to be amazing. Everybody wants this experience to be amazing. And we're all working together in the same direction. And everybody has good ideas. Everybody has good problems that need solving. So you really have to kind of put your ego away and sometimes not, well, you have to pick your battles. You have to decide when it's going to matter that you fight this fight or not. Because it's a collaborative work, and sometimes it matters more that the programmer wants to work with you than that you shoot down his idea. So I've kind of covered number 1 and number 2 a little bit here on my top 10 list. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to number 3? Yes.
I do.
Go ahead.
What I really don't see. I'm not a big gamer, but what would you suggest? Say I'm able to develop a great sellable story, but I would just kind of like to pass it along to the experts. What or sell it to the experts, or if it's at all sellable, or I don't know. Is that something that is possible to do, or not?
So the short answer is that there's no process like that in games. Like in movies, yeah, you can write up a script and sell it, and they make the movie, and you move on to the next script, right? Or you hire an artist and he makes the comic book, and you move on to the next thing. In games, if you walk into any game studio, everybody there is going to say they have 20 good ideas for a game. And so they don't really need somebody from the outside pitching them ideas, because they already feel like they've got way too many good ideas, and it's a matter of weeding out which ones they really should be working on instead of like soliciting them from outside.
Okay.
So if you have a story idea that you feel like would really fit best as a game, I really do recommend going the route that I'm going to push you into this month. Doing a text adventure using Twine, or there are a couple of other programs. I think you probably had Inklewriter experience in the first game writing class.
Yeah.
It's similar, but Twine is more robust in many ways. It lets you do more things, and it helps organize things a little better. So, so if you have an idea for a game that you think really would fit best as a game, and not as a novel, not as a movie, not as a, any other of these kinds of entertainment that you've been learning about, my recommendation is that you have to sit down and write it out as a text adventure. And there are places that sell text adventures. I'm going to see if I can share something with you that is not my bank account. Woo! Hello, homepage. Hello. And this is about where my computer usually crashes. Yay! Choice of the Vampire. The Fall of Memphis. Feast on the blood of a dying city, Memphis. 1873. Make your national debut in society. A conspiracy of vampires convene in Memphis to elect a new senator. Yeah, anyway, so, this is a company that pays writers and publishes text adventures. They're very much like the Choose Your Own Adventure game or Choose Your Own Adventure books that you might have read when you were a kid. It says we're looking for writers right here. You can play some of them. I wanted to give you a little.
Are these created using Twine or their own like proprietary tool?
This one is used. Proprietary tool would be being kind.
Okay.
It's you write it in a text document like .txt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like writing HTML, only
Okay.
more complicated.
Huh.
My favorite is Choice of the Dragon, partly because this is what got me hooked on their games, but you can see that you can play it on. They let you play it for free on the internet, or you can download it on the App Store or Google or on your Kindle. And the way they monetize this actually is with ads and but not like in annoying ways. They've done a really great job of making you want to play their games. So like it's a little bit like selling a drug. Like the first playthrough is free.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go back and try a different route, well, then would you mind paying 99 cents? And at that point you're like, I really would like to pay 99 cents because I had a good experience and I want to know what happens if I choose this other route. So Choice of the dragon, let us begin. A knight charges up the slope at you. His horse pounds at the ground, carrying a heavily armored warrior. As if he was your child's doll, the knight sets his lance to attack you. How did you defend yourself, O mighty dragon? Tell us. What do you guys think? Which one should we choose?
A puff of my fiery breath should be enough for him. Somebody else talk.
That's the one I usually choose to. You let loose an inferno of fire. The knight's horse is cooked nicely, and your stomach lets out a deafening rumble as the smell of roast destrier, that's not even a word I know, reaches your nostrils. The knight himself staggers to his feet. His armor managed to keep him alive, but only barely. Do you finish him off, victorious dragon? Of course, how dare he attack me? Or, I let him live to warn others of my immense power. Now that the threat's ended, he's beneath my concern.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Oh, of course. All right. Your jaws crush him in a single bite. That showed him. You know, it's going to get annoying to keep calling you great and mighty dragon. What's your name? I usually choose.
All these names are terrible.
All these names are terrible. You writers, you. All right. What name would you prefer? What?
I liked Calamveer. Whatever.
If you can go back, go ahead.
Smog.
Oh God.
Billy.
Yeah.
Are you a male or female? At this point, male?
Yeah.
Okay. I usually go with do not pester me with impudent questions at that point.
Do not pester me.
As you think about it, the knight's attack was probably inevitable after all. You did just kidnap the princess from right out of her tower, although isn't it a little sexist to always kidnap a princess? Maybe, but traditions demand that dragons kidnap princesses, even if that is sexist. How dare you question my actions? You know, I never thought about that before. I think I kidnapped a prince just to avoid being sexist. I'll have you know that I make a careful point of alternating between princes and princesses, but it happened to be a time for a princess. I heard a vote for that one, so we'll go there. As I was saying, the knight's attack was probably inevitable. After all, you did just kidnap the prince from right out of his tower. As you ripped the roof off his tower, the light glistened off your... would you like to specify the color of your hide? I wasn't sure what color to put in that description. Can we just get on with do the smashing? I'm sorry, that's the one I always choose. Yes, of course. Thanks, on with the show. What are you planning on doing with the prince, anyway? It's all about companionship and good conversation. I go for the ransom payments. Indeed, within a month, a large chest of gold comes to pay for the prince's release. What do you do then? Honor demands that I carry out my end of the bargain, or once I have the payment, I have no reason to delay my dinner. See.
Second one.
Crunch, munch, delicious. This would be a good time to talk a little more about your personality. All dragons can be described as brutality, cunning, disdain. As a young hatchling, you lived with your mother in a cave high up on the mountain. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop here because I encourage you all to go play the Choice of Dragon and other choice of games. But if this is my point, to get back to the actual content of the class, instead of just, using this time to play a game.
Which would be fun.
It's awesome. I love it. You love it. Or some of you love it anyway. But hopefully this is introducing you to a way. This is an actual game. If you put this in your portfolio and said, I want to get a job as a game writer, here is an example of my game writing, this would count. So it's not like people who are hiring game writers are looking for only people who have written, like, Halo or Call of Duty or whatever is the latest thing. they're looking for people who understand concepts like branching and choosing and showing and making the reader feel like they are making a difference instead of just existing and sitting back. So quickly, because our time is getting up, although you all said that 8 o'clock was better time anyway, so maybe you're all just waking up at this point. But number 3 on my list, whoa, I need to tie up that loose end. So, an interactive fiction like that is what I would recommend. If you have an idea that would fit best as a game, you go and write it yourself as interactive fiction like that. And you can pitch the idea to a company like Choice of Games, and they may or may not pick it up. And then if they don't pick it up, you can go write it yourself and publish it on Twine, or if they do pick it up, they'll work with you, and you write it kind of like a novel is how the process ends up going if you're doing an interactive fiction for that's been commissioned like that. So
Okay.
But if you noticed, there were a ton of choices there, and number 3 on my list is size is relative. I know that as you've been working through this program, like the assignments have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you realize that a 2-hour screenplay is actually a really big document. And you've been writing, I call them IP Bibles. What do they call them in the other classes? Just a Bible? Where you do all the research? Story Bibles? Okay. Yeah, so you do all this research, and you start with the elevator pitch or the log line or whatever, and it just gets bigger and bigger from there. And that happens to a certain extent in game writing. You usually have your Bible, you have a ton of research, you have a ton of documentation. So in some ways it gets huge. And if you've got a ton of branching like options like that, you have to write options for every one of those things that, when there were 4 different choices for how are you going to respond to the sexist question about being a dragon. There are 4 different responses to that, so you quickly realize that it branches out hugely and can get out of control. At the same time, gamers are there to interact with the game, even if it's a text adventure. You saw me getting bored with the long things of text and being like, I'm just picking the first one that looks interesting. I'm not actually reading the text. I'm going with, yes, I'm brutal. Yes, kill him. Yes. I want to be clicking the buttons. I want to be interacting. I don't want to be reading, which means as a writer, you may have done a ton of research and created all of this documentation, but in the end, the writing that the player sees needs to be short. It needs to be very concise, and well, like as my beautiful document here says, there may be 10,000 lines total, but they need to be very, very short lines. So it ends up being a little bit harder than you think it will be to write short. And we'll talk a little more about that. But someone skipped ahead already and asked about the pitch. And so we've kind of covered number 4. In other entertainment forms, writers pitch ideas to scripts and they're picked up, and that's not common except with these very few interactive fiction kind of setups that exist now. In the game industry, writers are usually brought in to fix problems, or to collaborate with the team and make it better. There are some games and some studios that really focus on storytelling. The best example, of course, is Mass Effect. It's a game, for those of you who don't play games a lot, it is almost an interactive movie where there's some action where you do have to like shoot things and make, you know, do video gamey things, but mostly it's about who's sleeping with who and who's on your team and how well you're interacting with other people and the conversations that you're choosing to have with people or not. And it has a ton of writing. One interview that I saw not too long ago was actually with someone who came off Mass Effect, worked same studio, but did Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And they had something like 6 man-years of writing time put into that game. So that's not like 8-hour days, six people working 8 hours a day for 6 years. That's if a person could work 24 hours a day and never stop. It's that long. So obviously they had a huge team working together, collaborating. And what they did that kind of helped was that, of course, they had different races and different groups, and so they would put one writer in charge of writing all of the dialogue and all of the really important plot elements relating to a particular race or, you know, group of aliens. And so, you know, one writer would really own that group, and then it would have a consistent voice, and they could still split up the work and all work at the same time together towards the final product. But it was definitely not something that one person can do. It's just not. You have to collaborate. So, moving right along, number 5, it's all about who you know. And this is the one part where, like, I spend most of this lecture telling you about how I don't want to say that game writing sucks, but game writing is less independent, less fun, it's more, you have to make more compromises, you have to be more ready to work with the team, you have to, like, I spend all of this time going, but number 5, it's in here in the middle because it gives us this little boost again, because it is all about who you know. Networking is so important in both industries, both, you know, all of the traditional other entertainment industries that you've been learning how to write for. It's all about who you know. It's, you know, who you can get to read your script and who you can get to be your artist. And I mean, networking is so important in every one of these fields, about if you want to be a professional and get paid for what you do. Differences in games, it's super easy to network. All these other ones, it's super hard to network. Especially when I talk to, like, that I mentioned that a couple of months ago I had almost all instructors in here who were from the film and like comics and other industries, and when I got to this one, they were all like, what? Game writers all get together and have drinks whenever possible? I'm like, yes. There are a lot of ways to make friends with game writers who are actively working in the industry right now, and that's how you get jobs. Like, you can occasionally find a job listing for, hey, this company over here is hiring a writer. But most of the jobs never get listed. What happens is that somebody calls me or their other friend and says, hey, our team needs a writer. Do you have anybody you recommend? And usually that's code for, are you busy? Is there room in your schedule? Could we hire you on contract? And you know, sometimes you can say yes and sometimes you can say no. And it's also very, like, man, it's a pain sometimes because you can't really talk about what you're talking about, but you've got to still talk about what you're talking about. My best example of this is that I was very busy with a contract I already had and was really enjoying working on, and somebody called me up and said, we need a narrative designer. It's kind of like a writer, lead writer, showrunner for a TV show. Anyway, we need a narrative designer on a social game. They couldn't even say Facebook. A social game that's coming out soon, and it's related to a popular television show on HBO that is based on a set of books. And so it needs to be really story heavy and really integrated with those books and the TV show. So we're looking for someone who can, like, manage this whole thing. Do you know of anybody? Are you available? That kind of thing.
When do they drop the banned words?
So that's what they asked me. So have any of you guys figured out what title that was for? Because I figured it out. I knew exactly what they were talking about.
I'm thinking of 2 shows. That's it.
All right. What are your guesses?
True Blood and Game of Thrones.
It was Game of Thrones.
I would think so. That's more
Oh
popular.
boy.
Yep. So they were calling me saying, do you want to work on a Facebook game for Game of Thrones? Do you want to be narrative designer? And I was like, I hate you because I'm already booked up.
No.
But there was not a listing for this. Like, it's not like if you were trolling the job boards that this was ever listed. They were people I knew from going to conferences and being actively involved in the community and people knowing my name. They called me up and said, hey, would you be available for a 6-month contract on this? This thing that I can't tell you about, except that, you know, I'll drop enough words that you figure out what it is I'm talking about so that you'll be interested. So, yeah, I had to say no because I was already contracted, but I said, I can't do it, but I recommend this other guy named John Myers. And they said, oh yeah, we've talked to him, but he's new and we weren't really sure if he could handle it. And I said, I've worked with him. I'll vouch for him. I think he could do what you need him to do. And that happens a lot as well. Like, I will get phone calls from people as well saying, hey, we're looking at hiring so-and-so. Have you worked with them? Do you recommend them? And so the networking is really important. And networking and that's another part of where the collaboration comes in. Like, if you can collaborate well, that's something people want to know. And that's true in that's what I want to take back over and say. It's true in every form of entertainment writing. When I worked on television alternate reality games and talked a lot with the writers on those television shows, they would say it's like being stuck on a desert island for 6 months. And so that's why everyone hires their friends or hires people that come highly recommended by their friends. Because if you're going to be stuck on a desert island for 6 months and your job is to build a raft to get you off the desert island, you want people there who are not going to drive you crazy, right? You want people there who are actually going to know how to build a raft. You want people who are going to be fun at 3 o'clock in the morning and not just a pain in the neck. And so that's why, I mean, at first it sounds like it's totally unfair that it's all about who you know. But that's why it's about who you know, because you'll end up in really intense collaborative situations with all of these people, and it matters how well you are able to work together. So that's why you have 4 classes on workshopping and working together. So number 6, and then what happens? The other forms of writing that you do traditionally are almost all linear. The only exception that I come up with, like very few that are trying to be a little bit nonlinear, like comics and alternate reality games, and the Avengers movies are trying to be a little bit like they're happening at the same time, only you have to wait 6 months to find out what was happening at the same time. But it's all linear. Like, you know that if you show the gun in Act 1, that people are going to know about it when you shoot it in Act 3. But in games writing, you don't know for sure that your player actually saw that gun. He may have run past it and not even registered that it was there. Or, you know, the crying child in the corner, or whatever big thing that you wanted them to notice, they may not see it in the order that you thought that they were going to see it in. So you have to kind of separate your elements into concrete little chunks that can be experienced individually at different times and still make sense. So if you see a crying child, you're like, hey, I wonder if I can help this crying child. Then you might go looking for, you know, the crying child's mother. Or if you turn right instead of turning left, you might encounter a mother who is missing her child, and oh my gosh, can you help me find my child? And in that case, like, 2 different players playing the same game are having 2 different experiences, because one is encountering the child first, the other is encountering the mother first. In the end, it's the same goal of getting the 2 back together, but you've had like, story-wise, if you were telling a story, you've experienced the story differently. So you have to learn how to compartmentalize a little bit with your plot points and your characters and some things like that. It takes practice, and some games are very much linear as well. They just give up on the whole non-linear thing and say, you have to watch this cutscene, we're going to take control away from you, you must watch this little movie so we know you watched it. Except then they add the little skip button, so players might skip it anyway, because they just want to get back to the shooting.
Oh, can I say something?
Yes! Comments, questions, go ahead.
Cutscenes seem to have fallen out of favor in recent years. I think they used to be, when I was a kid anyway, they were all over the place. And now there's not as many.
It's true.
Unless you're
there are
talking about Metal Gear, but
I was gonna say they're not as many. They hide them better, is what it is. They usually call them more interactive cutscenes now. Which, I mean, on the development side, that's what they call them. It's an interactive cutscene, where you really don't have as much control as you think you do, but you can still like move the camera around and look at what's going on and see what's happening behind you, or not pay attention to the person who's talking, that kind of thing. But it's still actually functionally a cutscene.
I get it.
So, yeah, they still manage to put you on rails, is what it's called. But, yeah. Right. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just...
Okay. I know, it's fallen out of favor because people were, like, spending thousands to millions of dollars on cutscenes and then watching people play the game and skip right past them because the players are there to play. They want action. They don't want to sit back and watch a movie. They want to be the ones doing the awesome stuff. So it's a little different, but
I don't know. I felt like I was missing something whenever I skipped a cutscene.
yeah, this is the hard part about talking to writers versus other people.
Story nerds.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but you don't necessarily play video games the way the majority play video games. They have done studies, like people get paid to do actual academic studies on figuring this stuff out, but there are different kinds of players who are interested in different things. And for instance, I am way more interested in collecting things and exploring than in shooting things. I don't really care what the quest is. Like, most games, you go find the person and they say, okay, I've got, rats are eating the corn in my field. I need you to go kill 10 rats and bring me their tails to prove that you killed 10 rats, and then I'll give you a reward. I don't care. I just go wandering off in the world until I hit an imaginary wall and get mad and have to go back and do the stupid quest junk. Because I just want to explore, and hey, if I want to collect things, I want to collect them because they're cute, not because they're rat tails. Anyway.
You must have loved Spyro.
My preferences in games. The point is, different people play games for different reasons, and the majority are not actually playing it the way you guys play games. So even, like, I started out working with television shows and websites and alternate reality games, and I was like, I can't get people to play my alternate reality games. Like, why aren't they in there playing? I want to get more players. Video games, they figured it out. Like, nobody questions that you're supposed to play a video game. How do they do it? So I wanted to become a video game writer, just so I could learn how they do it. And so I started making that transition in my career and discovered that, like, there were only, at the time, 4 people in the entire industry who had that title of writer in their credits. I was like, there are words on the screen. Somebody is writing this crap. Granted, most of it's crap, but somebody's writing it. So why can't I be one of the people writing that crap? And what I discovered is that it was programmers or the people answering the phones or, somebody's nephew. They'd be like, oh my gosh, we've got all these empty speech bubbles. We need somebody to come in and write something. Well, that's why it was crap. and that's why nobody was getting title in the credits as a writer. It's come a long way since then. And partly because they realized at the time that they were narrowing their audience. They were really only appealing, the games they were making were only appealing to people who wanted to shoot things and didn't care about the story or collecting or any other part of having fun. They just wanted to shoot things and show their friends that they were better than them, like competitive shooty things. And business people are like, you know what? I think there's more of a market out there. I think people like to play games other than shooty things. Like solitaire. Like, seriously, the most popular game that's played the most is the solitaire game that comes installed automatically on all Windows machines. That's the most played game ever. So, like, even all the wonderful numbers that people bring up with 10 million people playing World of Warcraft and stuff like that, Solitaire on Windows 7 is the most popular game that's been played the most. So there were people who realized that maybe we can reach a wider audience if we try things and, you know, add story and add exploration and collecting and some things like that, puzzle solving. Myst was one of the ones that first kind of showed people that there are more ways to experience video games. There were interactive fiction games before then, but they hadn't quite figured out how to add the pictures in there and make it fun. I need to get moving along. Item number 7, who am I talking to? This one is important for the assignments that you're doing in this class. So, in most entertainment writing, you have 2 audiences that you're writing for. One is like the director or the artist that's helping you bring this to life. So, and the other is the end user audience. I call them users because I'm a gamer. Audience. Viewer. That's the word I'm looking for. So, like when you write a film script, you have, you know, the scene, and the people who are watching the movie don't ever actually see or hear that piece of writing that you just did to say, you know, close up on Julia's face as she looks terrified about what was just said. You know, that's never actually spoken to the audience. It's written in the script so that the people making the film know what you have in mind. They do, however, the viewers hear the dialogue that is spoken afterwards, or if it's in a comic script, they will see it on the comic panel. So you're kind of talking to 2 different audiences. You're writing for 2 different audiences in most entertainment writing. In game writing, you end up writing for at least, I have listed 5 here, different audiences. One is, of course, the end player, the dialogue that shows up on the screen in the little boxes of, oh no, help save the princess from the castle. But then you also have to write a lot of documentation for programmers to explain what it is that you are expecting, like when this dialogue happens, or like how it interacts with the rest of the game, or when not to play this out. Anyway, you end up writing for programmers. You also end up writing for artists and explaining to artists, and you have to use kind of different language for these 2 different audiences, because artists are, I love them, but they're not analytical. We'll put it that way. They need to know what it feels like to be this character, right? They want to know what other art styles you're kind of trying to reference. Programmers need to know they want to know the numbers. And it's a very different way of writing for each of these two audiences. And then there's the marketing audience, where a lot of what you write ends up on a website somewhere as they promote the game that's coming up, or being put directly into the press kit because the marketing department's too busy, and so they just take whatever you wrote last week and send it out as part of the press kit. And you also end up writing for the suits, because sometimes you'll get hired as a writer because somebody realizes that, okay, we need to get funding for this game idea we have, so we'll hire a writer to write the pitch doc. Now, this doesn't mean that I am writing my idea to get the money. They have hired me to write down their idea in a way that is compelling and interesting and will sell it to somebody who wants to invest. And so you do write pitch docs, but they're not your own pitches, usually. But that's writing for a business audience and not for, and you know, the people who play the game are never going to hear that elevator pitch of, oh, this is Call of Duty, but with snakes. You know, the audience is never going to hear that, hopefully. Item number 8 is the handoff. And people who've written for film love and hate this one. But, so scripts, especially for film and television, you write the script and you hand it off to other people and the creation happens, and a lot of times the writer isn't even allowed on set. Like, don't get the writers on here. We need to get this thing done. We don't need them rewriting and fixing things at the last minute. We're making a movie. We're not rewriting it. So you write a script and you hand it off and it's gone. It's out of your hands. You've got the money. You walk away and hope they don't ruin it too badly. On the other hand, in game writing, writers usually are there to the bitter end, or as close to the bitter end as they can get. And sometimes it's because you were hired at the bitter end. But at any rate, more than once, as a contract writer, I have been in an office as deadlines are looming and holy cow, I gotta get this done. And everybody is pitching in to do as much as possible. And if you can code, they love you. If you can do anything like help with morale, make coffee, I know I hate it, but sometimes whatever you can do to help, you're there to help. Like, you are not excluded from the set, you are in, like, come help, all hands on deck, let's be here. And one of the things that writers often have, if you're willing to do it, is contribute your copy editing skills. Because a lot of times in these dark days of, oh my gosh, it's not working and we've got to make this big presentation tomorrow, it's not working. It was working a minute ago. Why isn't it working now? Oftentimes you can go stand behind the programmer's shoulders and just be like, you're missing a semicolon somewhere, aren't you? And they can say, yes, somewhere there's a semicolon or there's a bracket or there's something, I can't see it, where is it? It's missing or it's extra. And so you can use your copy editing skills and just be like, it's right there. And then they love you. And they want to work with you again on their next game. And anyway, so you're pitching in at the last minute. You're there. You're on set. You're to the bitter end. You don't hand off your story most of the time. Number 9 is who's driving. authorial intent is problematic, and if you ever want to get game writers arguing, or game writers and AI people arguing, AI is an artificial intelligence, those programmers. So in most entertainment writing, the writer's job is to get your point across, like create characters that people relate to and really show your authorial intent and be like, this is the experience I want you to have, and I want you to experience this in this way. I am driving this experience. And in game writing, you're not. It's not your story. In reality, even though you are writing all of the words, you're coming up with the major plot points, it's not your story, because it's the player's story. If they feel like they have played through your story, like in film, you have succeeded if you have been able to say, I really connected with that character. Like, I was really that character, and I connected with that character. I was really in it with that character. But in games, people don't talk about, well, then Lara Croft jumped across this cliff. When players talk about it, they say, then I jumped across this cliff. Then I climbed the mountain. Then I had to shoot the guy in the head that I thought was my friend. Like, they're talking about it as I did this, I did that, even though it's a character on a screen. And that's not something that they say about film. Even though they really relate to a particular character, they're never like, hey man, I love, like, I don't know, House is a good show. But you're never saying, I solved the mystery at the last minute, you know? You're saying, oh my gosh, House solved the mystery at the last minute. Anyway. So it's not your story, and you kind of have to give that up if you want to give them a good experience, because it's about the player having a good experience and the player experiencing the story, and not about you and your awesomeness as an author. Number 10. This one makes the film writers laugh too, because we'll fix it in. When it comes to television, there's kind of a joke that's not a joke, that's we'll fix it in post. So if something goes wrong in filming, my favorite example was I was involved in a TV show where they said something and they said Taipei, and they said Taiwan and they meant Taipei. Like, it was written in the script, and the actor said the script as written, but it didn't make any sense. They meant, like, no, really, you mean the city, right? Not the entire island? Or anyway, so I brought this up to them. I was like, oh no, this actually doesn't make any sense if you know anything about Taiwan and Taipei. And the response I got was, don't worry, we'll fix it in post. And they did. It was remarkable. You watch the final episode when it's all done, and with the magic of editing and with redoing a couple of lines and changing whose face you're focused on when the line is said, nobody who wasn't aware that this was a mistake they made on film, during filming, it was totally fixed. Nobody noticed it. Nobody cared. I was like, wow, you totally did fix it in post. Post-production is what they mean by that. We'll fix it in post. So the hard part is that in games, the not so funny joke is we'll fix it in story. And a lot of time, a lot of the a lot of the work that game writers do is fixing things. That's why one of the chapters that you get to read in this month is about script doctoring. That's kind of what we call it, fixing other people's scripts, or fixing the problems when the craziness of game development happens, and when you're not looking at a game as a story experience, like, okay, we've got to get from point A to point B to point C to point D. In film, you're looking at it like, yeah, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, done. In games, you're usually looking at it more like, okay, how far along are we on level 7? How far along are we on level 3? What date do we have to ship or they cancel the game? We've got to make some compromises here. All right, level 3 and level 7, they're gone. Just not happening. And the art, you know, the artists who work hard on it, the level designers who worked hard on it, they're all like, oh, I'm so sad to see my work go, but that means I'm moved over to help finish up level 4 and level 8. But suddenly someone sits back and goes, wait, that means that the door in level 2 that was supposed to open up into hell, you know, dark, fiery furnace, now opens up into a happy living room. I mean, that's the way it functions. That's the way the game works. And their response is not to say, oh, we'd better put in a quick scene of hell because there was an important plot point that happened there. Their response is, we'll get the writer in here and they'll fix it in story. So you're like, I had this he confronts his father in hell, and then he goes to the happy living room weirdness moment. But now he's just going from street to living room, and you're missing, like, the major... Okay. And usually, you're given very little time to fix it. So, like, you can't go away for 3 months and come back with oh, I figured out how to make it better. Unfortunately, you usually have to fix it within a week or 2 and have some plausible explanation for why this major plot point that you were, okay, we're going to rearrange things. And the reason for this, there is a good reason. It's not just because they hate writers. It feels that way at the time. Like, really? You guys hate me that much? But the reason is, it's a lot easier to change text than it is to change an entire level of a video game. Like, there's a lot more programming, there are a lot more people involved. I can go in and rewrite the text 4 or 5 times until it fits, like, just me spending a few hours working on it, instead of having a team of 45 people work on it for 3 weeks. So when you're looking at budgets, it's a lot easier and faster and cheaper to fix it in story. So it happens a lot, and you learn how to think fast, be creative without like, you got to skip over the bitterness and anger phase and be like, okay, new challenge. How am I going to fix this problem? Just as an example, to tell you this really does happen, we'll fix it in story. One of the games, not the last one I was on, but one not too long ago, I was hired to come in for 2 days in the office and then do some more contract work later. But the reason they were bringing me into the office for 2 days was because they had just fired their 4th writer. The game was ready to ship within 3 months. So it was built, like the game was playable. You could go in and play through the entire game. There were just no words in it. And I came in, I was like, okay, so first explain why you fired your last writer, so I don't make the same mistakes he did. Let's talk about that. Like I said, this is all about collaboration. I want to know how to work best with the entire team and not make the mistakes that my prior guy made. What's not working? And their response was, well, the story he came up with got more and more complex. It got crazier and crazier, and we just realized it didn't make any sense. And we realized that the game as you play it didn't make any sense. Like, nothing made sense. And I'm like, okay, well, show me the game. And so they showed me the game, and it involved a garden. People, once again, the characters were all created, the art was all done. So there was a garden, there were a cast of characters all dressed in Victorian clothing, and they were going to be time traveling. It's like, really? Time travel? In Victorian clothing. Okay. So I hate time travel. Let's just get this out of the way. I hate time travel. It causes all kinds of... I will back up. I hate to write time travel. I love to read other people's work with time travel. So if any of you have stories that are time travel based, it's not like I'm going to mark you down for doing time travel. It's just really hard to write time travel. And yet that was a key element in their game, because it was a HOG. What's the hidden object game? They shorten it to HOG, and it's very flattering. But probably as a kid, you saw these games, like the old-fashioned version, in a magazine or something, or just an activity book, where there was a pretty scene of a landscape, and you had to find the pencil that was hidden in the tree branch, that kind of thing. So those games exist now today, only there's this beautiful landscape or interesting scene, and you have to click on the pencil that's in the tree. And so, yeah, it was that kind of a game with a garden like Farmville, and people who are dressed in Victorian clothing. And they wanted this, they didn't want to be constrained by anything. They wanted to be able to put any scene at any time frame in the past. They did say not future, so there was no future time travel. But they wanted to be able to do modern Morocco. They wanted to do ancient Egypt. They wanted to do ancient Americas. They wanted time to be, like, not an issue for the people who were making the pretty pictures and hiding things in the pretty pictures. So time travel had to be an element here. Anyway, I make that face again and again. But, right, so the last guy's idea, they were like, we didn't get it, we didn't understand it, it stopped making sense, and it was too complicated, and so we need you to fix it. And so I spent the morning with them, like, playing the game, because like I said, you could play the game, it just didn't have any words in it. Playing the game, understanding what the guy before me did that they didn't like. And then I was sitting in a room with a bunch of vice presidents and producers and one programmer. And they were like, okay, now we're gonna fix this problem. And I said, no. you guys are all going to go back to your desks because I know you're all very busy. So you all go back to your desks, leave me alone for 3 hours. In 3 hours, come back and we'll talk. Because in 3 hours, I will have 4 to 5 different possible solutions for your problem that will make sense and will bring all of these elements together and have them be coherent. And either you will like one of these 4 things, or you will hate all of them, and I will go back to my hotel room tonight and come up with 4 to 5 new ones, or there will be elements of 2 or 3 that you like that we can fit together into a story that works for everyone, and we can move forward with this game and get it out the door. So I had 3 hours to fix this huge problem of none of this makes sense. And one of the things that they didn't like about the previous guy's idea was that it was steampunk based. I was like,
what was wrong with Steam? What was that? Is it Steam Puff? Or Puff Daddy? I don't know.
Yeah, it's steampunk.
Oh, okay.
Steampunk. It's a genre of science fiction where they assume that people from the steam engine era have time travel and amazing extra technology. Like, they've got computers and things, but they run on steam.
Okay.
So it's a genre out there. It's a thing. And that's why everyone was dressed in Victorian clothing, because that tends to be what the steampunk genre goes with. But I was at a bit of a loss because they didn't like the steampunk idea. Anyway. So I did it. I had 4 ideas when they came back, and one of them involved steampunk, partly so that they could hate that one and we could talk about the others. And that's kind of a dangerous thing to do, to throw one in there that you want them to hate when you're giving people options of story ideas. But it's kind of something that you often do to help them focus and realize what it is that they don't like. So I needed to know if it was that they didn't like the steampunk idea at all, or if it was just that they didn't like his implementation of steampunk. So anyway, turns out they didn't like steampunk at all. They had the same reaction that you did, like, steam what? So yeah, didn't use that. But I ended up using log lines, which I think you've had a lot of experience with, hopefully, throughout your time here, to help explain and promote each of my ideas and present it. So, like, that's another thing that you're doing as a game writer, is presenting and convincing other people to go along with your ideas. So that's part of the collaborative process, part of the workshopping process, part of, like, defending your idea, and also acknowledging when something that you're doing isn't working. So one of my ideas was that we go with Jane Austen. Now, we couldn't get the Jane Austen rights because that costs lots of money, but we would, you know, it would be Jane Austen in all but name. So basically, Jane Austen is running a boarding school where she teaches people how to time travel, because if anybody's going to figure out time travel, it's going to be Jane Austen. Now, this game is aimed at women 25 to 45, and so Jane Austen is quite popular with women in that demographic. The men in the group may not know what I'm talking about. But it's a particular genre of Um, it's all about finding a husband. That's what the major conflict is, finding a husband. But it's set in the like
They
set in the
travel time looking for husbands. What a waste of time. I'm sorry.
maybe there's one out there somewhere. There's not one here, you know. Anyway, so that was one option I presented. Another, because at the time it was very popular, was Desperate Housewives. And that was more about gossip, like the gossipy stuff that happens on the everyday average street. And so the garden element had more to do with my garden's better than your garden. And so I'd have a log line of Desperate Housewives meets I can't even remember now how I fit Desperate Housewives into time travel. That was fueled by caffeine and desperation, but I had one. It fit somehow. Anyway, and then I also had the Illuminati angle, where the first book to ever really talk about time travel was Jules Verne, and it was definitely Victorian era. And so I was like, hey, the Illuminati, conspiracy theory, all of that kind of stuff is real. And Jules Verne figured it out. And so that wasn't science fiction. We can use Jules Verne because he's in the public domain. And so that's where the science fiction angle comes in, and it's a secret society of people who are trying to maintain the timeline and are going back in time to find things that have been left behind by other people. Their arch enemies are going around strewing pencils in ancient Africa. So you have to go fix it. That's the one that ended up liking the most. So we went with the secret society of time travel
management,
fixing problems. But they also liked the Jane Austen aspect, so they kind of shoved that in there too, and we came up with a working solution that night. And so overnight, I wrote this out in a summary like you have been assigned to write this week. I got to do it overnight. You guys get an entire week. With beginning, end, this is how this character fits, this is how that character fits, and the only... Alright, Philip, I'm going to have to mute you because you're being too noisy. Okay, so the only thing I got to change about what people actually experienced in the game was that one of the characters was a guy. Most of the characters that already existed were women, and there was one male character, and he was named Gibbon. And I was like, no, he can't be named Gibbon. Gibbon is a monkey. No, he can't be named Gibbon. And they were like, oh, but we wanted a classic English name. And I'm like, Gibbon is not a classic English name. It's a monkey. And so I did finally win that battle, and he became named Jeeves, which I didn't feel like was a huge success because it was still a huge cliche, but whatever. Jeeves. Much better than Gibbon. So, yes, so I ended up, that was my example of we'll fix it in story, where they had the game working, but they needed a story that made it all make sense, because it didn't make sense at all about why we were doing this thing. So how are we going to motivate players to actually play the game if it doesn't make any sense? So you create an interesting story that engages people and moves them along. If you guys are interested, that game is still out there and you can play it. It's on Facebook. It's called Gardens of Time. So, yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Narrative design by me. But like 2 years ago, and it's been ongoing and not written by me for the rest of that time. So I don't know where they've taken it from there, but yeah, secret society with time travel and Jane Austen. Yeah, I don't know. You do desperate things when you only have 3 hours to come up with a good idea. But that happens a lot in game writing. So I see 2 people with their hands raised. Are they left over, or do you have questions?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It is left over, but I do have a question if we have time.
Okay. Yeah, go for it. I've got time.
Okay, cool. I know you said you work mainly on contracts, and after reading your book, it sounds like a lot of game writers work mainly on contracts. I was just wondering how much travel that involves.
That is a very good question. A lot of game writers do a lot of work remotely. So learning how to collaborate remotely, like you've been learning in the last few classes and in this one, actually is a huge benefit. Like, one reason that I'm telling you in all of my emails and stuff, like, hey, this is my Skype name, you guys should totally add me on Skype, is because that's how we do a lot of meetings and things, is on Skype. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I do a lot of, like this one I just described, I had 2 days. They flew me out there for 2 days. They put me up in a hotel for one night, flew me back the next night, and I was home. And the rest of the work I did for them for the next 3 months was all done just over the internet. So the travel that I mostly do, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not lying to you. The travel that I mostly do is, okay, there are a ton of game conferences where people who make games get together and talk about how to make games better. So there are big conferences like the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco in the spring of every year is a major one. And so I go to that. And the handy thing is that all of my clients are also going to that conference. And so I don't actually, like when I was starting out in my career, I was able to go to sessions and learn more about how games are made from different, I'd go learn about how animators deal with physics. I would go learn how the artificial intelligence people are solving the problem of, whatever lighting and camera movement and things like that. So I would go learn from the sessions, and then go out and meet people and make contacts and network and let people know I was available for contract work and that kind of thing. Now when I go to these conferences, it's because all of my clients are also there. And so beforehand, I spend the weeks leading up to GDC making a very complicated full schedule of meetings, because since we're all in the same place, we're all going to have meetings, and it's going to be, hey, am I working with you this year? Yes, it's going to be on this project. Or I don't think we're going to need you until June, and this project may or may not fly. Or hey, you've been working with us for the last 6 months. Let's get caught up on where we're at. And here's the latest build. And you can actually see us pitch it and you can help us pitch it, some things like that. So there is travel involved, but it's not always travel to the place where the game is being made. A lot of times it's going to conferences instead and having those meetings at conferences. Some game writing contracts do involve, for instance, if I had taken the job to be narrative designer for Game of Thrones Facebook game, which at the time I was really desperately sad that I couldn't take, but the contract I was working on at the time was like, you don't want that job. That intellectual property is all about sex and blood. You don't want to write about that. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to write about that. You're right. So I was able to let it go. And it's a nice, popular name to have on your resume, but wouldn't have been a lot of fun to work on for 6 months. And I would have had to move to Boston for 6 months. And it's expensive to live in Boston for just 6 months. So I don't know. It's expensive to live in Boston anytime. But there are some contract jobs that require that you go off and leave your family and friends for 6 months to a year and move to a different city, or you can bring them along, but you'll never see them. So, yeah. Does that answer your question about working remotely?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very, very much.
It's getting a little bit late in the office, and so our very helpful garbage guy is coming through and cleaning up our office for us. But does anybody else have a question?
Wendy, I emailed you about, or I replied back to you about the list of the email addresses.
Yes.
I got your welcome letter, but I never got the list of the email letters or the email list. Could you please send that to me again?
Okay, so when you look at the welcome letter,
Mm-hmm.
on the list of who it was sent to,
let's see. I'm looking right now. Let's see. The welcome letter is Monday. Okay. I have the welcome letter open right now, and there's no attachment or anything like that, but it says to Jeff, Douglas, Kimberlyn, David, and a couple other people lists, but there's no, and then there's hello, and then what you have written, and then you sign it, but I don't see any email addresses or anything like that.
okay, what client are you using to read your email? Is this in
This is just through
Entourage?
just the Outlook,
Outlook. Okay.
through.
So when you look at that list of who it was sent to, you can double click on the name of the person that you want to send an email to, and that email address is actually in there. It's just hiding it from you to be convenient. I hate it when programs are helpful that way. Like, oh, you don't need to know their email address. Yes, I do. Show me their email address. Anyway, it's there. Double click on their name, and it should probably start up on an email to them.
Okay.
So give that a try.
All
So,
right.
Can I ask you quickly, is your name pronounced Mia or Maya?
It's Maya.
Maya. Okay.
Yeah.
You had a very good question about like how I'm asking you guys to work in teams, like short lists of teams, and you didn't get to pick who's on your team. And what happens if you're having trouble with anything going on your team? And this is a good question that I wanted to address for everybody because it's at the heart of this class. Like, you can't workshop if you're not working together. And trust is definitely a part of working together. And so if you find yourself in a team that is just not working for one reason or another, like if it gets toxic, or if you start feeling like you're the one that's carrying the load and nobody else is doing their share, or everybody else is doing their thing at the very last second and making it impossible for you to do your thing, anything like that. I run this very much like a real office. And that's why I split you into teams and gave you team names. That's how studios do it. You'll walk into a big room and there will be a sign hanging over here, and this is team. I think I used bird names for you guys. This is Team Eagle over here, and over there is Team. The most annoying one I ever walked in on was they all had numbers. Team 152 is over here. Team 738 is over there. I'm like, oh my gosh, can you dehumanize them any further? Like, what is 722 supposed to mean? How am I supposed to remember that? Anyway, I've digressed hugely. So my point is, I want you to handle it in the same way that you would in a professional office. If somebody that you're supposed to be working with isn't pulling their weight, or is whatever, I'm your supervisor in this scenario. So you get in contact with me and you let me know what's going on, and seriously, email me, talk to me, email them, copy me. We can set up individual times for individual teams. Like, let's find a time when all 4 of you can be on Skype or in a training session like this or something, in a Google Hangout. Let's have a meeting and hash things out until people can work together. Or if it's just really not working out, we can rearrange teams a little bit so that, if there's just a personality conflict that's never going to work, that happens in the real world. And if it's just not going to work out, I can move you around. But this week is the week to do that. So if there's anybody that's like, don't make me work that. But I'm assuming anybody is saying that, because I know I would have gotten an email already if that was the case. But yeah, treat me like your supervisor, like your boss at work, and like you've got a team member that's like, I don't know how to talk to that person. I will be here to I will mostly try to help the 2 of you work it out, or work together, or give you advice or suggestions about how to make it work, and how you can do this yourself in the future, so that if you're not lucky enough to have a good supervisor, you can have some tools in your tool belt for workshopping and working together well. So that's my aim. I really am, like, I love game writing. I love interactive narrative. That's my thing. I love working together with the players to create their story with the help of a computer or whatever. Like, I used to do alternate reality games, so it with the help of a card, help of a TV show, whatever it is. I love working together with people to make games and stories and experiences that are amazing and fun. So I want to help you guys learn how to work together and have that same kind of fun and useful, productive working environment with your colleagues. So that's my goal. Other than just, hey, games are awesome, I'm going to teach you how to do as much game writing as possible. Really, my focus is those of you who are interested in game writing, I will try to teach you as much as I possibly can in a month. But a huge part of it is being collaborative, being able to work together in a team. So I'm going to turn this light on because I know I keep going dark. Okay. Philip, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's just a quick one about an assignment.
Yes.
Well, two, actually. And I'm sorry I was noisy before. My first question is, can I submit... I finished my 5-paragraph summary yesterday, but I made some corrections today that I think maybe improve it a little bit. Can I submit that in like a response post to my first one? Hello?
The short answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
The longer answer is, does FSO not let you like delete a post?
I think you can delete a post.
Oh, maybe I can't.
But if not, it's not that different, and I don't think it's going to affect my grade that much. I like the way it is.
It's time to go home. I don't care what you are working on. Today is Thursday, August 8th. The time is 9 p.m. It is currently 84 degrees Fahrenheit in winter.
Sorry, I've got a timer to tell me to go home because it's 9 o'clock. And my butler, the phone, doesn't care.
I don't care what you are working on.
Yes. Sorry. It's intentionally a little bit rude so that I will actually get my butt out the door. But I will stay and answer your questions. So, yeah, just post it in a response post. As long as it's not confusing to your teammates, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't care.
And my second question is, it says we're supposed to do a response post for the discussion on group writing.
Yes.
How many do you want?
How many responses?
Yeah.
Just one.
Oh, okay. I think I can handle that.
I mean, you can respond to more than one if you want to, but one is the minimum requirement, yeah.
Okay. But most of the work should be going into the responses to our teammates in the plot summary thing.
Yes.
Okay.
The other discussion post is mostly, how should I put this? I put it in there to kind of gauge how much you guys know already about working together and to remind you about what you've already learned about working together so that I don't have to give a boring lecture about how to work together. Because I think you've already had a few of those. Not that they're boring, but I just mean I think you already know a lot about it. And so having a discussion where you talk through it a little bit will just remind everybody of best practices. And yeah, that one's mostly just a reminder and get your brain thinking in that direction. But the summary and feedback to your teammates is the heart of the matter.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Are we all tired of looking at my face? Listening to me? No. You can go read my books instead. Totally teasing. All right. I have 2 other topics that I usually do during this month. One is about dialogue, and we do that one during the week where we talk more about dialogue in games. If I remember right, that's next week. Might be the week after. Don't remember. Anyway, hi! This is a new class. I'm still trying to remember how it's organized. But, so one is about dialogue. The other one is where I try to get a industry person who is not me to come in and be a guest speaker and
Cool.
Answer your questions and like kind of you can ask them the same questions that you ask me and find out if you get different answers and stuff like that. But they're people who are out there working in the game writing world right now. So
Can you get James Part now?
I can try. I don't know. He's busy. I'll ask him though.
Okay. That would be
Look at
fun.
me, writing a note. Yes, James Port now. Yeah, we'll see. He likes to keep very, very busy, so I don't know if I can carve out an hour of his time.
That's okay.
Like he's got a Kickstarter going right now, doesn't he?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll want to come on and talk about his Kickstarter. That's cool.
Yeah. And who's the guy he has speaking for him all the time?
I don't remember.
Daniel something.
Yeah. Him I don't know. Like I've met, I've shaken his hand, but I don't know him as well as James. So my question about that is I've got those 2 topics, and the one with the guest speaker sort of depends on their schedule, but is often the last week of class.
Cool.
The other, so that's 3, and there are 4 weeks in the class. Usually what I do is for that 4th week, I set up the time and just say it's an Ask Me Anything session. Like you can just ask me whatever you want. If it's more questions about assignments or anything, like my career or what my favorite color is, I don't know, whatever. But I don't usually get a lot of attendance to that one, which is fine. So is there a topic that you guys would be more interested in for that 4th week? Or would you rather not, like, would you rather have 1 week where you don't have to, like, think about showing up for class? Any preferences?
Can we, like, maybe email you later?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, what if we have some time to think about it?
Yep. If you realize, oh, what I'd really like to hear more about is this, absolutely send me an email.
Awesome.
All right. I think unless there are more questions, I'm going to call it a night. And I'm, of course, the one night I get the backup working, my computer doesn't crash. But
the butler's gonna be mad at you.
My butler's like already glaring at me, and he's gonna start yelling at me again in 5 minutes, 3 minutes, because it's a 10-minute snooze. Anyway.
All right. Thanks for the chat, Professor.
It was nice to meet you all, and I look forward to seeing what ideas you're working on. And I am a grammar and spelling Nazi, so I do it because I care. Honestly, because in the game world, there are so many programmers And in programming, if you misspell something, as long as you misspell it consistently, it doesn't matter. Like, I've seen some terribly spelled words in code. Like, they mean to say, oh, what was my favorite one? Whimsy. They completely misspelled whimsy, but they misspelled it the same way throughout the entire code, and so it functioned. But the point is that if the writer isn't, can't follow the rules of spelling and grammar, they see it as a game and attention to detail thing, and like spelling and grammar, it's a competition to them. So so I am only a grammar Nazi because I care, and I want to prepare you for the real world where people will make fun of you because they're like, hey, I know how to spell that word and I'm a programmer. Really? And I suck at spelling myself. So I have had to work on it very hard and make it a game myself. So if you're interested in how to make spelling into a game, it only happened with the advent of red squiggly lines. They are my game mechanics. Anyway, so I do care. I will be noticing grammar and spelling and marking down on it. That's the only other warning I have. Otherwise, good luck. I'll talk to you later. We'll do it at 8 o'clock next week.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Have a nice
Bye.
evening. Bye.
Come on, you can do it. End it. Go do training. You can stop without crashing. I promise. Oh, come on. Don't die on me now. All right. Maybe training.